So hello, everyone, and good evening. My name is Mark Boharnwa. Thank you for joining us for tonight's ASRC Falconer Lecture. This is the fourth in our spring 2022 series. Tonight's lecture is Zoom only, and your video and audio have been disabled. If you have a question for our speaker, please type it into the Zoom chat feature, and all questions will be addressed during the question and answer session by your lecture host, Dr. Craig Ferguson. It is my pleasure now to introduce Dr. Christopher Thorncroft, Director of the Atmospheric Sciences Research Center, the New York State Mesonet, and the University at Albany Center of Excellence in Weather and Climate Analytics. Dr. Thorncroft is also a full professor in the Department of Atmospheric and Environmental Sciences at the University at Albany. Chris will provide a brief history of the Falconer Lectures as well as an overview of the ASRC. Chris?
Thank you, Mark, and welcome everyone to this important lecture today. First of all, I'd like to say something a little bit about Ray Faulkner, after who this seminar series is named. So Ray, as many of you may know or remember, was often referred to as Mr. Weather. From his early days as a weather observer atop Mount Washington in New Hampshire to his work at the General Electric Research Laboratory and Nobel laureate Irving Langmuir's Project Cirrus, Ray was an enthusiastic disciple of the atmosphere. In 1961, when Vincent Schaefer, discoverer of cloud seeding, established the Atmospheric Sciences Research Center, he hired Ray as his first member. From that time on, Ray's boundless energy was poured into public education on weather and the environment. His popular radio weather commentaries, his articles, and his lecture series made him widely known as the voice of the Atmospheric Sciences Research Center. So Ray started this series in the summer of 1962 at Whiteface Mountain, and in 1973 expanded to a spring series here on the UAlbany campus, and that's the series we're in tonight. So I'd like to also take this opportunity to briefly say something about the center. And for those who are not familiar with it. So, you know, as I just said, the center was established in 1961. We have 14 research faculty, 20 graduate students, 27 research scientists and postdocs. And to complete the team, we have 10 admin and technical staff. I want to just highlight some of the research that we do here at the center. We have a lot of expertise in renewable energy, emphasizing wind and solar, as well as grid resiliency more generally. We work on weather and climate issues, including weather extremes and climate change in New York State itself. We have a lot of interest in the lowest 1 or 2 kilometers of the atmosphere in the so-called boundary layer where we live. We are exploiting artificial intelligence and machine learning to enable decision-making in various areas. And we have a long tradition of carrying out research in air quality and atmospheric chemistry to exploit, and a lot of that was actually exploiting the Whiteface Mountain. And finally, we have a growing interest in urban weather and climate, and especially a growing interest in looking at weather and climate and air quality issues in New York City. Just quickly, some of the resources that we have at our disposal. We have the beautiful Whiteface Mountain facility, which ASRC has been running for more than 50 years now. We also run and maintain the New York State Mesonet, which is a network of weather stations across the state. That data is used for homeland security issues, protecting life and property, but it also is exploited in many other ways in terms of fundamental science, but also various applications. We're very proud of our Center of Excellence in Weather and Climate Data Analytics. The state funds us to work with industry for the benefit of the state and the economic development of the state. We've just had the positive news that our funding for this is up to $1 million for this current year. So that's quite a significant activity, and very proud of that. Also in the center, we have lots of big numbers here, and you're meant to be impressed by those big numbers, but I'm not going to go through them, don't worry. It's just we have a very powerful infrastructure that supports artificial intelligence and machine learning and supportive decision making and visualization. So that's something quite special, and actually that area is of growing interest on the campus at the moment, which I'm sure you will hear more about in the future. Just also want to sell, this is my last slide before we go to the speaker, the fact that we are now housed in the E-Tech building on the Harriman campus. And within that building, we have not only the center, we have the Department of Atmospheric Environmental Sciences, we have the College of Emergency Management, Homeland Security and Cybersecurity, and a lot of other features here, including the Mesonet, the National Weather Service, the Environmental Engineering Department in the College of Engineering, Center of Excellence, the Excite Laboratory, and also business development, which actually links to our COE. So it's quite a hub of excitement and provides many opportunities for interdisciplinary research. And with that, I will pass over to Craig Ferguson, who's going to introduce today's speaker.
So tonight, it is my pleasure to introduce the Falconer Lecturer, Dr. Zhe Zhu, Professor of the University of Connecticut Department of Natural Resources and the Environment, and Director of the University of Connecticut Global Environmental Remote Sensing Laboratory. Professor Zhu, an expert in satellite remote sensing, is performing pioneering work in the area of land surface change detection. His lab develops and applies new change detection algorithms that integrate a variety of publicly available, very high resolution satellite remote sensing datasets, including NASA USGS Landsat data, NASA Black Marble nighttime lights data, and new European Space Agency PlanetScope data. His lab's products support retrospective trend analyses, but are geared towards enabling continuous, real-time operational monitoring of land cover across the continental US at 30-meter spatial resolution for applications in forest management, surface water resource assessment, crop production estimates, and coastal tidal wetland change, among other uses. Professor Zhu has authored more than 50 science articles in a span of less than 10 years and received more than 7,500 citations, which places him in the top 1/1000th of remote sensing scientists globally. Please join me in welcoming Professor Zhu.
Thanks, Craig. So let me share my screen here. So can you see my screen now?
Looks good.
Great. Thanks for the invitation. And it's my honor to present my talk here. And my talk today mostly will be introducing this monitoring and characterization of land disturbance. And I was going to introduce some of the algorithms and some of the very preliminary results we just created like a few weeks ago. Okay, so we are actually changing the entire Earth, like half of the entire Earth has been changed by us, by such as urbanization, farming, and pastures, plantations. And in addition to this direct impact by us, there's also all kinds of indirect impacts everywhere. For example, we know that in California, there's wildfire almost increasing at much larger frequency and much larger area. And this is some of the photo I take in front of my yard, basically what looks like in front of my house after I say yes. And also forests influenced by this beetle insect in the Colorado and other northern part of the North America, floodings. And this is one of figure just created, you can see starting from 1900 all the way to 2019, basically the economic damage by this natural disaster by different kinds of agents. And you can see that it's increasing a lot since 1970s. And particularly in the recent past 10 years, it's at the magnitude of about 3 to even like 200 to 300 billion dollars in terms of how much this kind of land disturbance can causing a loss in economics. So it's very important to monitoring where they are and how they are influencing us. And one very unique way to monitoring land disturbance definitely is using satellite data, because it's able to provide this consistent and much larger area of where to tell us the question on where, when, why, and how this land has been disturbed at a large scale. And this figure actually shows some of the NASA Earth Science satellites present through 2023. You can see that a lot of them, and many of them are currently for Earth observation, for land observation particularly. And what I'm talking most here will be on this Landsat 8 and Landsat 7. But right now we already have Landsat 9 on orbit. So we basically have 3 satellites on orbit, but Landsat 7 is just finished its service, I think 1 or 2 weeks ago. So right now we have Landsat 7, though in the sky, but it's not acquiring very good science data, but 8 and 9 are functioning well. And this is one of the animation I've taken from using all the available Landsat 7 and 8 and looking at a very small piece of land in the central United States. Basically, by using 2 sensors, we're able to see the land surface at about like every 8 days. Every week, you're going to have a look at what's going on there. And in this way, and we have a data archive of more, this year is actually the 50th years of Landsat. So we're able to see what's going on in the last 5 decades continuously in every week. And in this way, you can see how this agriculture fields has been managed by humans, by irrigation, by agricultural harvest, etc. So if you don't know about the history of Landsat, this figure actually provides a brief look at the history of Landsat. There is a series of right now 9 Landsat data available. I didn't put Landsat 9 here, but Landsat 9 is just functioning, I think a few months ago. In total, the 9 sensors, but Landsat 6 never made to the orbit. But all the 8 of them right now, it's 2 of them are working, Landsat 8 and 9. And since Landsat 4, the spatial resolution goes to 30 meters. So previously they're like 60 meters. And after Landsat 4, we're able to have both the thermal, shorter infrared band in total. So most of the analysis we did on Landsat data actually starting from Landsat 4. So starting from 1982. And by using this Landsat 4 all the way to Landsat 8 or 9, we're able to have almost 40 years of archive. And every 8 days, we're able to have a visit of the same land surface if we have 2 satellite data available. And you can see that they may have some gaps, but most of the time, this is one of the data gap which Landsat 8, 6 never made to the orbit. But most of the time, we have 2 sensors available looking at the entire world. So basically, we're able to have a lot of places able to have 8 days revisit. And one algorithm I want to introduce to monitoring land change is called this CODE algorithm. It's an abbreviation for called continuous monitoring of land disturbance. And you can see on the top panel, this shows the harmonics model. That's basically the equation we use for monitoring land disturbance. And the first image below actually shows how this model actually works. It takes all the good observation from Landsat image, which is on the right. Let's take a look at it again. On the right is Landsat image. You can see the year, the month, and day for the image was collected. And the image on the left basically is the observation from a near infrared band. The black dots means it's a clear observation. It's not cloud, not cloud shadow, not snow. And we're able to make a time series model. And in that way, we're able to predict what the future observation looks like. And by comparing model prediction with the observation, we're able to find the breaks in the time series model, which is something like that. The circle shows the change. And in that way, we can have established new models. And you probably noticed the model is actually interactively changing when there's a new observation came, because it's using every observation, if it's identified, not as identified as a change, it will be used in the model estimation again to provide more robust future estimation. So it's an iterative process. And we can do this for every pixels on the land surface. And here on the image below actually shows the high resolution data from Google Earth for exact same location taken from the Landsat image. So this basically is a 30 meter by 30 meter location looking at the same area, but much higher resolution. And that's actually a location at the UConn campus. You can see that there is actually previously some residential area, isolated building, but later on they removed that and built some new entire, this is a huge new building. So there's no land cover, land use change. It's still the same land cover, land use, urban. However, there's a land disturbance caused by human. We call this kind of disturbance mechanical. And this is one of demonstration that land disturbance are not necessarily to change land cover, land use. A lot of them, they modifies the original land surface to making it serving slightly differences, purposes, or making its condition different from the previous state. And by apply this continuous monitoring land disturbance algorithm for all the pixels for the conterminous US, and that's the amount of data, how it looks like for every grid. So basically, we're using analysis ready data provided by the USGS. The entire CONUS is cut into different grids. Each grid is about 5,000 by 5,000 pixels. And there's about like 400 grids to cover the CONUS area. And the color actually indicate how much images exist for all the available Landsat 4, 5, 7, 8, 9 image. And you can see that some of the location can have even more than 4,000 starting from 1982 to the present. And we download all the image as long as the cloud cover is less than 100%. So if even it's 99% of cloud, we're still using it because the 1% of clear observation can still be useful. And that's about 70 terabytes of data to be analyzed. And we run this on the HPC locally. And if you apply the continuous land monitoring, disturbance monitoring algorithm for every pixels on the 70 terabytes of data, we're able to see the CONUS-wide land disturbance map starting from 1985 to 2020. And this is different color. This is the first map we created. And the different color indicate when the change occurred. And the recent disturbance will cover the previous disturbance. So that's why you can see a lot of color are in red color, but it's possible that multiple disturbance occurred prior to the most recent change, but it's covered by the most recent change color. So in order to better see how frequent each location has been disturbed, we made a moving average by 3 kilometers, and using the height to demonstrate the number of disturbance that has been occurred in the past 40 years. And that's how it looks like. And you can see that for the northeast part of the country is pretty stable. A lot of them are constantly covered by forest. But if you go to the east, the southern east part of the country, the more disturbance showed up. Actually, they're mostly causing by, like, for example, hurricanes, forest management. And if you go to the central part of the US, you can see it's a much higher elevation is seen here. That's mostly caused by agricultural practice as well as climate interannual variability. And in the West, you can see this huge, big increase in the height in California. California is pretty busy state with lots of different kind of disturbance, such as fire, house development, all kinds of natural disasters, landslides, and as well as drought. We all know California has gone through a very severe drought in the recent past years. So in this way, we're able to tell every pixel for the CONUS wide what happened in the past like 30 or 40 years. But it is also very important to characterizing the land disturbance, basically answer the question why it is changing. For example, is it because of forest harvest? Is it because mechanical? So mechanical basically is an anthropogenic change, but it's on non-forested land, such as like urban development, agricultural practice. And the third, like such as stress, right? Basically it means such as insect infestation, disease, drought, and debris, which includes like artificial material, debris or natural debris caused by hurricane, tornado, landslide, volcanoes. And hydrology, basically the water changes, long-term, short-term transition from land to water or from water to land, can be caused by flooding, sea level rising, and damming. And fire can be both natural or anthropogenic, because it can be prescribed fire or wildfire, and others such as natural vegetation regrowth or year-to-year climate variability. And we created an algorithm called ODACA. It's an abbreviation for the object-based disturbance agent classification approach. And the method basically is we're firstly using all the available Landsat time series, and we run this code algorithm. So we're able to know exactly when and where land disturbance occurred for every pixels. And later on, we put them into annual maps. So each year there's going to be a land disturbance map, and we're using an image object method to put those land disturbance into different objects. So basically connect all the pixels if they're spatially connected. And then we are extracting this information by extracting the spectral, temporal, spatial, topography variable all together, and using them as the input for classification, and using a full set of open source disturbance data set as the training data to classify each disturbance object. And in this way, we're able to know not only when the disturbance occurred, but also why, basically the direct driver of the land disturbance. So what's most important in this approach is how we can derive this open source disturbance data set. It's extremely difficult, I would say, if you want to interpret what the agent of the disturbance, right? How do you know it's a hydrology, stress, fire, mechanical, or harvest? So what we did is we know that for the United States, there's so many different kinds of open source data that contain rich information. Some of them are very accurate, some of them are less accurate. But if we combine this information with our knowledge and using some manual visual interpretation to further improve this data set, we're able to actually almost automatically extract information for training for harvest, mechanical, stress, debris, hydrology, and fire, and others. And if you see there's a star on the debris, it's because for the debris, we're using this NASA Global Landslide Catalog and NOAA Severe Weather Database. But and to overlap with our disturbance map for the same time, they said there's an event and at the same time we identify disturbance. However, there's sometimes not that accurate, right? You can have some other event happen at the same time when this like hurricane came. So there is some manual interpretation to remove those noise or outliers in this training data for the debris, but for all the other places, it's fully automated. And for the input data, this is one of the demonstration of, actually, you can see the lower left is the Landsat image for collected in the July in 2015, before, during, and after the disturbance. This is actually insect infestation in New England area. You can see during the disturbance, there's much browner in color. It's mostly because it's leaf out because of the mostly gypsy moth infestation. But after that, the vegetation grow back. You can see it gets more red in color. So this is a false color composite. I give the red color to the near-infrared band. So the more red in color, the more vegetation they are. And what we did is we first run code. So we are able to identify the time series models and do the prediction. And when the predicted value is not different, it's different from the observed a few times in a row, we identify this first pixel as a disturbance. And later on, we initialize the new models here. So for our input data, we have time series model before the change here. We have time series model after the change. We also have the observation during the change. And all three sets of information are used as input data in this change agent classification. And where this is all the data we use for this classification, basically it has a total of 175 variables. And so most of, like during the change, we are using variable like change magnitude trend variation, change intervals, frequency, and time. For the pre-change, we're basically using the coefficient of time series model. We're using the mean square error from time series estimation. For the post-change estimation, we're using the model and RMSE. And we also compute the topography variables such as elevation, aspect, and slope in our input. Another thing I want to mention is that we're also treat each disturbance as an object, because each event usually they happen at much larger scale. And so we're using a patch-based analysis. So we are extract a lot of variables for each disturbance object, such as standard deviation of change time, standard deviation of change magnitude, area, core area index, core area. So a lot of them, like perimeter to area ratio, etc. Put them all together to help our training. The reason for doing that is mostly because the object shape, texture information contains rich information on the kind of driver it is. So how we do that? Basically, firstly, we automatically extract our training data randomly from our training reference data pool, like the one I just mentioned. And later on, we're using a random forest to classify, to train it, to using each sample pixel as training, and classify our disturbance map for every pixel. And consider we already have an object, disturbance object previously extracted. So for each object, we're using a majority vote. For example, here, more pixels are classified in red color. So the entire classified object will be in red. The assumption is that the same disturbance agent, they usually are the same disturbance object. And that's usually the case if you're looking at the disturbance map. So one thing to extract training data from our training sample is that how many of them you want to extract. This is, if you're using random forest, one of the very tricky question is, if you have multiple classes, how much training data you want to select from each classes. Consider there's some large class, some smaller classes. And if you take a look at one of paper I published in 2016, it's best to using a proportion-based method to select training data. So basically, the larger your class, the more sample you want from that class. And you also want to have a balance. So for example, if the class is too small, you want to bump up that class. If class is too large, you want to reduce the proportion of that class. So there is an optimized strategy, but basically you need to know the proportion of the area of each class when you are extracting your training data. But how do you know that, right? It's like a chicken and egg question issue, because you don't, only after you classify a map, you will know the proportion of each class for you to extract the training data. So what we did is we're using an iterative approach to identify the proportion and the training data. Basically, we started with equal number of training data. So each class started with the same amount. And later on, we create our first disturbance map. And in this way, we will have a ballpark estimation of the proportion of each class. So now we can extract training data based on this proportional number, right? And we can do this iteratively. And we get a new data, we classify the map, we get a new proportion, we extract the training data automatically using this new proportion. And we can do that multiple times until we get the best accuracy, right? So we actually do this for the corner slide for reference for a few test sites. And what you can see that the overall accuracy increased dramatically when we have the first iteration. There is more than like 3% increase in the overall accuracy, and later on it's stabilized. So basically we iterate this one time to get the proportion of the map, and then we're using this proportion to better develop our training data select strategy. So we tested this classification strategy right now for 5 pretty large area. Basically, each area covers 3 by 3 analysis ready data. And this is how it looks like overlap on the NLCD, the National Land Cover Database. And we have the Rocky Mountain sites. Mostly there are a lot of beetle infestation, fire. The far west, there's a busy area with a lot of agriculture, urban development, fire. Great Plains, mostly agriculture practice. Southwest, that's mostly like hurricanes and also the forest management. And New England is a mix of forest management as well as the urban development. So one thing I want to mention is that to do this classification, we know that for training data, it's better to using local training, right? The training data from its local area is always better than the global training data. However, for local area, it's sometimes for some rare classes, you may not able to select enough training data. So in that way, we're using some proportion of local training data and some proportion of global training data. Basically, some proportion where, for example, for this New England, some proportion were directly from the sites, and all the other test sites will contribute as a global training data set. And we tested the proportion of the local training data versus the global training data. And by changing this, how the overall accuracy changes. And you can see that 60% basically showed up the best results. So you want to have 60% of the data that are local, but you want to have 40% of them that are from other sites, places, to provide you to have a better idea, to have a fuller pictures of the land surface. And we also tested the number of training samples. Basically, usually we think the more the data, the better the overall accuracy, and that's usually the case. But when we're approaching about 10,000 training samples, the accuracy didn't increase anymore. So we were taking that as a strategy. And let's take a look how it looks like. We firstly run this for the entire northeast part of the country. So there are a lot of kind of disturbance. It covers very large area. And the different colors means the different kinds of disturbance, like harvest, mechanical, stress, wind, hydrogen, fire. And the darker the color, the more recent the change are. The brighter, the lighter the color, the more earlier the change. And the more recent change can cover the previous change if they're happening at the same location. And this is how it looks like as a full picture, but you can see a lot of northern part in Maine, in New Hampshire, that it's actually mostly a forest management. But if you go south, you see there are more mechanical, mostly due to this urban development. Very few fire here. So let's zoom in to some locations at this A, B, C, D, E location. And we were looking at the change happen, detected and classified using this new framework. The image on the left are the change detected and classified. Image on the right is basically all the available Landsat image are collected from 1980s all the way to 2018. And you can see that for the sites E, this is actually, you see a lot of forest management in green color, and also there are quite some hydrology related change. That's actually a dam has been built in this area, and there's a lot of water related change happened. And if you take a look at sites, let's see, site C, there's a lot of red color. You can see that this line-shaped red, actually the new road being built or modified road, right? You can have a road previously it's not asphalt, and now it's changed to asphalt road. So it can actually change, showing up as mechanical disturbance. And if you take a look at Site A actually, I think it's in New York State, and there's actually quite some large size fire happened in the yellow color. You can see that. And the Site D actually is a big tornado happened in Massachusetts. And you can see it's the trajectory of the tornado. And you can actually see the shape of it after that in the Landsat image. You can see it's getting much greener in the summer because it's removed all the trees, but the grass is getting showing up in the signals. And Site B actually is in Rhode Island. You can see this browning color because stress that mostly caused by gypsy moth infestation. So this is basically how it looks like if you're looking at much closer for the different location in the New England area. So that's the map. And let's take a look at some of the results for the 5 large sites I just showed in the previous map. This is basically in the New England area, but using 3x3 Landsat ARD, and the L1, L2, L3, L4 you see here. This is map. This is high resolution reference image, and those three images are actually from this large 3x3 ARD from this location, L1, L2, L3, and L4. And you can see harvest, mechanical, debris by tornado, stress is actually captured. But one thing I want to mention that the stress captured here is less than the stress I showed previously, mostly because the previous one I'm using Landsat ARD data that are having overlap area. So in some of the Landsat paths, there's an overlap between the adjacent row. In that way, you can actually double the temporal frequency. But in places, if you remove this adjacent overlap area, the temporal frequency will be lower, and some of the ephemeral change we're not able to show that perfectly there. And that's why the stress is less than the image I just showed before. And this is the southwest area. You can see a lot of the places they are actually caused by the harvest, a lot of forest management. And the L2, actually, you can see the debris actually there are a lot of debris related change caused by the hurricanes, and which is quite normal considered the location, right? And debris L3, this is by tornado and mechanical. So mechanical can be both agriculture as well as urban development. So for here, I can see it's mostly agriculture practice. And also there's hydrology related changes occur. And this is another site in the Great Plain. You can see a lot of the agriculture related mechanical. There's big fire in the L2. Mechanical from the urban development and hydrology from the water changes surround at the banks. And this is another site in the Rock Mountain. You can see the large fires in this area. There are a lot of fire here. And also there's some forest harvest, mechanical, and stress. Stress are mostly gypsy moth infestation. Not gypsy moth, mostly beetle infestation showing up. And here is the far west. You can see a large area of mechanical change, mostly caused by agriculture, large fire everywhere, hydrology, and other mostly the interannual climate variability is showing up there. So this is the results. We did an accuracy assessment for all the different kinds of land disturbance type. You can see the overall accuracy is pretty good. And the producers and users accuracy for the different kinds. This is for the no disturbance, harvest, mechanical stress, debris, hydrology, fire. They're pretty good. But this one is stress. The stress is actually not the one that's not showing very well. It's at 60% producers and users accuracy. And this is a final map we just finished a few weeks ago, CONUS-wide, showing all the land disturbance and the agent starting from 1985 to 2020. And it looks pretty nice to showing all the locations. And we had a brief look at it. It looks okay, but a lot of places are very accurate, but there's also some confusion places. For example, for irrigated agriculture, sometimes it didn't show up as mechanical, it's showing up as hydrology, which is not 100% wrong, right? It's changing the hydrology of soil, though it's mechanical related, right? It's human irrigation. But we're still trying to improve it. So we call this version beta version, and hopefully we will have a version 1, official version 1 version available. So right now we are providing a web application. So if you go to this website, you're able to see all the land disturbance CONUS-wide at 30-meter resolution from 1985 to 2020. I'm going to show this briefly here. If you click it here, you're going to able to have a map showing up. So let's finish this, give the conclusion before we go to the maps. So the code algorithm can detect land disturbance at large scale using Landsat time series from 1985 to 2020 and the media spatial resolution, basically 30-meter resolution. And this ODACA approach can provide accurate agent information. And the combined use of this code and ODACA can create this CONUS-wide disturbance agent at 30-meter resolution annually. So let's take a look at the maps. So basically, that's how the maps looks like. You can see that's a CONUS-wide map, and it provides you all the years from 1985 to 2020. You can select the starting and ending year to show the cumulative change within each time range, and you can select different kind of agent to let it show or not show. Right now, I'm let every agent is showing up. Another thing is that you can actually have the satellite image as a background, and you can change the adjust this opacity to let it showing up more or less. One thing I want to mention is that this map has 30-meter resolution for all locations. So you're able to go anywhere you want to see the change history. So it's relevant, locally relevant for any person in the United States. So what I did here is I just searched this location. I think that's where your building is located. And let's take a look what's the change history, what's the driver for this location. So let's change so that's, if you zoom in all the way here, that's basically you will have a contact of what's happened, right? So there are some forest management, but a lot of them are actually mechanical. And I take a look at, if you go to this is where your building is located. There's actually some mechanical change. And it's around like 2012, 2011, 2012. You can search, you can let the change starting from 2011 to 2012. And you can see there's a change that occurred in this 2 years. And I take a look at this Google Earth image. It's actually, there's something happened on the roof. You probably know much more than what I did. I did a quick, like a Google Earth look. The roof has been modified. I think that's showing up in this Google Earth image. The roof, this is basically 2011. And this is 2013. And if you go back, you can see the roof previously is very dark, and there's some, I don't know what's there, but there's something there above. Maybe there's some upgradation done in 2011, 2012. You can see after that, it's much cleaner there. So the disturbance we're able to detect is not just cover land use change. And I want to say that a lot of land disturbance that are not going to causing any kind of cover land use change. However, those kind of information are extremely important if you want to know the history of the land surface and know the drivers of the change. That's all for my talk. Hopefully you enjoyed it. So you can zoom out to have a better look at it. Let's show the map. Making black. Yeah, that's how it looks like, corners wide. Yeah. One last thing I want to say that it's a teamwork. It's not most of the slides I'm just presenting, but it's the GERS, the Global Environment Remote Sensing Lab. Those are the brilliant mind that behind this, making all the work possible and making all the app and slides available to that's why I'm able to show this fancy slides. Yeah. Thank you.